So Ben is a warmonger. Ben has been wrong on basically every single issue you can name. He was with you with the vaccine and every other war. Ben is always calling for other people's young men to go and die in some war. He seems to love it. I don't know if he has short man syndrome, but he's always behind his desk calling about how important it is that big, strong men like me
just all too much. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. So I want to be very clear right now. We're just discussing what Andrew Tate said about Ben Shapiro. This is not an endorsement for Andrew Tate. This is just what he's saying about Ben Shapiro in this situation right now. And he's already making some pretty good points. He was on Piers Morgan. He actually was on there a couple days ago, and he was saying about Ben always wanting to go, fight wars or just being a neocon or being on the wrong side of things, like especially the vaccine. If anybody goes back to the beginning of my channel, you'll know that my channel was dedicated to the coup flies and all that stuff or whatever. But anyway, Ben was calling people dopes for not getting the jab, all kinds of things. So
early in the conflict, I think it was 3 days in, we're discussing possible peace talks. He tweeted, no, absolutely not. Fuck them, kill them all. And I said, Ben, as a man who's done his own fighting, because I've had a life of pain and violence, listen to me. Peace is always worth a conversation. What I said is that we should always be prepared to at least discuss peace. He, because he's a warmonger, said, no, peace is not worth a conversation. You're this, you're that, because he's always sitting behind his desk. He must have a booster chair, and he's always running his mouth trying to invoke violence and call for war. And I find it kind of hypocritical, because a man who's so small he would die if he was slapped on the street, sitting behind a desk and screaming for other people to be annihilated, I think is kind of, it's worse than
I believe
it's insane.
I believe if he was sitting here listening to this, he would say that what he's screaming for is for Jewish people in Israel to defend themselves. And he's a Jewish man.
So, but the thing is, okay, you can scream for Jewish people to defend themselves. It's Piers Morgan, like we already know what you're going to do. It's the easy takes, right? In war, there's negotiations, right? This Ukraine war would not have lasted as long as it did had Boris Johnson not run over to Ukraine back in April 2022, telling Zelensky, like, no, don't negotiate with Russia. Don't negotiate with Russia. We got you. We got you. This could have been over a long time ago. Look at Ukraine. They're not doing good.
His call for war. And I agree. Defending yourself.
That's all he does.
That's all he does. And calling for war and defending yourself is very different than genocide. And Ben, like I said, overall, most of Ben's worldviews and mine probably align. We don't align on the religious sect. We don't rely on the religious points. Fine. But our overall worldviews about how society should function probably align on many of the key issues. I don't have a beef with Ben, and I don't watch his show, and I have no idea what he talks about a lot of the time. But what I do know is every time I turn it on, he's calling for someone else's son to go and die in a ditch somewhere for his interests. And I don't like people who are not advocates for peace. Blessed are the peacemakers, said Candace, who's far more intelligent.
First of all, I can't take the fact that he can't say Candace, okay, said Candace. No, blessed are the peacemakers, said God, okay, that's number one. And then you could say Candace did quote the Bible or something. Like, we're not giving that to Candace, but it's just hilarious that he can't say her name right.
And she is completely right. He replied that rhetoric, starting an argument with me when I said we should talk about peace. I say we should talk about peace. He calls for the death of civilians, and somehow we're asking why my point of view is seen as abstract. It's insane. Why can't we all just sit down and say the fighting must end? Why can't we do that? Why can't we sit and say, nobody should be dying. Let's stop using the most advanced military weaponry on the planet to blow the limbs off.
I understand the reasoning is, Israel has to defend itself, or Israel has to get rid of the threats to their existence, or whatever you want to say. All right, cool. But we have a lot of advanced weapons. This is not 1948. This is 2023. Why do we have to wipe away hundreds of people at a time for a possible Hamas person that may or may not be there, and then not receive the evidence of if they were there or not?
Why can't we say that without being deemed some kind of terrorist sympathizer or anti-Semite? It's insanity. Trump came along and didn't start a single war. He's the only one who didn't. And they're going to come along him and make him a bad guy. When a new president comes in, it's just endless war and death and killing. Have you seen a dead body, Piers? Have you seen people lose a fucking limb? It's disgusting. I know what's happening over there.
Have you seen that?
I don't need to tell you about the parts of my history that I'm not prepared to share, Piers.
I said
it to Ben. I said people who have done their own fighting and seen their own violence and have seen people bleed out in the street from a stab wound are not going to be so smart and so quick to sit behind a desk and call for the death of of innocent people. It's disgusting what's happening. I don't want anyone to die on either side. And when I come along as a peacemaker and say, this is insane, because he's a warmonger, because he has chosen blinkers and sees one side of the argument and refuses to accept the humanity of Palestinians, he says I'm a bad person for calling for peace.
We know why, because he'll probably listen to this interview and say, this guy can't even describe Hamas as terrorism.
And it always goes back to that, right? So all of that, somebody just screams about the humanity of Palestinians. Yes, there are a lot of people who don't look at them as like humans. I can show you a post that really disturbed the crap out of me, where it just, I mean, I couldn't believe it. And matter of fact, I am going to show you the post because it's just disturbing, and I'll blur out some stuff, but some of the stuff I'm seeing, it's like people are saying, and I'm going to blur the person's name out. I'm just shocked, and I'm not putting anybody out on Front Street. There's no picking sides. You don't have to, but my goodness, the rooting on for people ending, it is barbaric to me at this point. Like it is, because we're talking about kids, and it's just innocent people, like, and it's just like, ha, yay, get him. And this guy, after all of that, he said, like, how am I crazy? I'm calling for peace. Like, why doesn't he want to talk about peace? And I can understand, at least if Piers Morgan would have said, because Ben is probably hurting right now, and he's not really trying to work out all of that, what you're saying. He's not trying to figure out a strategy for peace. He's mad, he's angry, and he's not ready to go there yet, because he feels like his heritage and his people, they were attacked. So he's not ready to have that conversation right now. All we could do is acknowledge where he's coming from. We don't have to like it or accept it, but it is what it is. No, this guy says, well, because he'll watch his interview and say, you can't describe what Hamas did, or it just always goes back to that. You can't, first of all, Piers Morgan takes people on his show and he tries to force them to say, do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Hamas? And I know me, I would be that person coming on the show and be like, no, I'm not going to do it, simply because you keep telling me, you keep trying to control my speech. I refuse to do it. If you would just leave me alone and not tell me to do it, I'll come on here and I'll condemn them. That's not the issue. I don't know why everybody needs me to. Let me tell you why I don't like that too, by the way. I remember when Trump was running for president the second time, and every time he had a debate, they would say, do you condemn white supremacy? Do you condemn? I mean, it was every video. It wasn't even just the debates. It was every interview. So do you denounce white supremacy? Do you denounce white supremacy? Do you denounce neo-Nazis? Do you denounce? And it was like, why do we need, I remember being like, why do I need Donald Trump to keep denouncing white supremacy? And this was before too, this was before I was sure that I was going to vote for him. And I even believed all the headlines. But when I was debunking headlines and I was seeing these videos, I'm like, how many times does somebody have to denounce white supremacy? Why do we need people to condemn and denounce? These people are not gods. They're human beings. So you're not going to walk me into a speech. No, you're not going to control me that way. But it always comes down to that. Well, you have to condemn this first in order for me to appreciate what you're saying. You have to condemn this first. You have to say these words first before I can take you seriously. Absolutely not. That's why even with the jab, I never started off with, well, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. Never started off with that. Does it matter if I am or not? Doesn't matter. The stuff is still the same. The facts are still the same.